I would be a very ungrateful son if I didn't mention what our dad did for us on this day by not intervening when his son is being crucified 2,000 years ago. I owe everything. I owe my life. I owe everything to his dedication and sacrifice for me. I lived my life one way for a long time and really blew it, and really didn't think I was worth anything. And because I was dating a very wise woman who said, we need God in our lives, I found him, and the forgiveness that you can allow yourself to accept and clean up your life and start over is the greatest miracle I think one can receive, and the greatest miracle in my life. Today is Good Friday, and as you know, when I went to college, I took early Christology from the history department, and I learned what it was really actually like, at that time. And it was a brutal world. I wanted to bring Shannon Bream in because she is the author of the book, The Women of the Bible Speak. You probably know her from Fox. She's an anchor there. But she is much more than just an anchor. She has really led an impressive life. And she wrote the book, The Women of the Bible Speak, trying to find the lessons for today in the wisdom of the women in the Bible. And Shannon joins us now. Hi, Shannon. How are you?
Glenn, it's such a joy to join you. Thank you.
Thank you. So I wanted to spend a few minutes just on Mary, since it is Friday. I cannot imagine seeing this happen to your child, and what that must have been like, and how. I mean, I've thought just recently. My daughter Mary went in for brain surgery, and we had a scare and thought we might lose her, and it was devastating. Just the thought. Watching crucifixion. Tell me about what we can learn from Mary.
I mean, she was there at the foot of the cross. I can't imagine, as you said, seeing your child wrongfully accused, being tortured and beaten, and watching them crucified to death. It's almost too much. But I feel like it's important always, and especially this time of year, for us to allow ourselves to think about what that was. I've been reflecting on that and reading through the crucifixion a lot these last few weeks and thinking you have to come face to face with that and know the enormous, beautiful sacrifice that was made for you. That is just, to me, an incredible message of redemption, that Christ knew what he would face. He could have walked away from it. And we see his anguished prayers where he says, your will, not mine. And he goes through with that to save all of us. And Mary has to be a witness to that. And it's something I included in the book because I'm so used to studying her on the front end, where she's this faithful young woman who gets visited by an angel and finds about her divine appointment. But we wanted to follow her story all the way through, unable to really get my mind around what it must have been like for her to sit there at that crucifixion. But to know that in the days following, she was with the disciples praying in the upper room. She was a faithful early part of launching the church as we now know it. And she never shied away from the enormous pain that her son suffered all through his life, especially during his ministry in those final hours.
Women did not have a place, really, at the table. I mean, Jesus, I think, and I have nothing to go on. I took Christology through the history department, and so we just looked at the history of those times and what it must have really been like. And I know when we got to Mary Magdalene, it might have been The fact that she was a prostitute might have been a fudge just because of what was happening in the year 200. As they were assembling everything, it may be absolutely true, but one of the reasons why it may be not accurate is for political reasons at the time, or she may have just been called that at the time because she was following Jesus. And women didn't do that. Unmarried women did not follow a pack of men. Otherwise, you would have been considered a whore, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's so important to look at the context of the time, and there is debate with theological scholars who are much more well-trained than I am. But we know she had been delivered from a number of demons and that she was following Christ. And Christ included women in his inner circle. They were his friends. They were taught. They were allowed to teach at his feet and learn at his feet, which was an amazing thing because that was not the norm back then. But we see it not only with Mary Magdalene, but Mary, the sister pair, Martha and Mary, and other women who were close to him. And think about the women he went to who were not accepted in society, the woman who was going to be stoned for adultery, or the Samaritan woman in the well living in shame. He never judged or condemned those people. He would say, go and sin no more. Leave that part of your life. But I don't condemn you. I accept you. You are my equal. You're in the image of God. And I think that's such a beautiful thing I don't want people to miss.
So tell me, one of my favorite women of the of the Bible is Esther. I just love the story of Esther. Tell me her story and how what lessons you take from her.
She was part of the dispersed Jews who were all over the place. They didn't have their own homeland at the time. And so she was an orphan. She was taken in by her uncle Mordecai, who raised her. And at one point, the king of Persia gets very mad at the queen. She will not show up and obey him. And so he gets rid of her, and he sends out this search nationwide for a new queen. And at that point, Esther goes in, and Mordecai told her, don't talk about your Jewish background. But all through this process, she had so much favor. Everybody immediately loved her as a favorite. When the king saw her, that was it. She was the one for him. So she is chosen as the queen of Persia now. And during this process, there's Haman, this bad guy who is like the number 2 to the king, but he doesn't like the Jews, in part because Mordecai, Esther's uncle, will not bow down to him when he walks through the gates and through the area. So he comes up with this decree, gets the king's seal on it, and it's basically to wipe out the Jewish people. Well, Mordecai is lamenting and mourning. Finally, word gets back to Esther is what's going to happen. And she's nervous. If you go to the king without being asked for, you could be killed on the spot. She's nervous. And Mordecai says, don't think if you don't step up and do something here, this could be for such a time as this, that phrase we've heard over and over again. And he says, the salvation may come from somewhere else, but don't think that you and your family are going to be safe. And so she says, have all the people fast for 3 days, and then I'll go to the king. If I perish, I perish. And all the Jewish people join her in this fasting. She goes to the king. He has great favor on her. He says, I'll give you anything up to half of my kingdom. She eventually reveals what happens. Well, in those days, because the king's ring had been used to seal this decree to wipe out the Jewish people, he couldn't undo it. But what they ended up doing was taking out Haman, the bad guy, and he gave Esther and Mordecai, the king did, the power to then send out a new decree that the Jewish people were allowed to do whatever they had to defend themselves and also to take the spoils of anybody who came after them. So she was in this perfect place at the right time to step up, even in the most frightening circumstances, threat to her own life, to save the entire Jewish people. There's so many twists and turns in her stories, and you can see how God just providentially had her right there, and she stepped up when she needed courage the most.
So do you believe that all of us we all have a job to do? We may not remember what it is, but we have a job to do. We're placed at a certain time for certain reasons. And if we align ourselves with him, he's never on our side. We have to be on his side. If we align ourselves with him, we can accomplish these things. Do you believe that for everybody?
I do. I do think that every one of us created is unique in God's plan, beloved and cherished. I really firmly believe that about every life that's created. And I included women in this book who got off track, who made messes and bad decisions, because we've all done that. But I wanted to show that God redeems that. I mean, he can work through our messes, get us back on track. And some of the women who made the biggest mistakes in the Bible are people who wind up in the lineage of Christ. So I think it's a beautiful thing that there's redemption for all of us, no matter what.
Well, it is, it's amazing because it is already done and so freely given. And yet I think the problem is most of us won't accept it. We don't think we're worthy, or we won't really work it to be able to let go of whatever it is that we did. I mean, it's sad that it is already done, but the problem is we don't always accept it.
I think it's so counterintuitive. We think we have to work for everything. But in Ephesians it says, "For by grace are you saved." It's the gift of God, not of works, so no man can boast. It's not about us. We can never do enough. But there's freedom, I think, and great peace in that, saying, I couldn't, but you're perfect and you did this for me. And it does take a leap of faith to reach out for it and to accept it. But I think anything takes a leap of faith to say there's no God or there's no afterlife or there's no purpose. That takes faith too. Why not invest it in something that is a beautiful, loving redemption that we could never do for ourselves, but is just there waiting for us?
How did you survive in the business that we're both in for this long and keep your faith? That's a serious question. How do you do it?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, for me, I couldn't do any of this without that. It's my morning grounding. It's the grounding throughout the day, but I have to spend time in the Word and prayer and disconnect from this business, which will feed your ego and, just stroke your ego if you let it. You can't believe your best press or your worst press. Honestly, I have to reorient my mind all the time. I got fired from my very first TV job by a guy who told me I was the worst person he'd ever seen and I would never make it in the business. And it was a mistake to ever put me on TV, which I think was God's gift to me, because that'll keep you humble and kick you in the gut really quickly. And it'll remind you this job is not ever going to love you back. So I have a bit of perspective, having been, fully humiliated in my first job.
Yeah. Shannon, it's good to talk to you again. Thank you so much for being on the program, and God bless you.
Thank you for having me. Blessed Easter to you guys.
Shannon Bream, the author of The Women of the Bible Speak, maybe something that you can bring to the table this Easter weekend.